Hey guys, my name is Clay Westing, and I wanted to give you guys kind of a tech demo and description of this horror game I'm working on. So I started this project from the Unreal-Wwise Integration tutorial, but then I fully built out it into a full game, and I decided to make a horror game out of it. I love horror, so I always wanted to make something like that. It's inspired a lot by Inside, Amnesia, The Dark Descent, as well as Resident Evil 2. So I am using 198 of my 200 allotted media items in Wise. So the main purpose of this is to test audio systems using Wise and Unreal. There's lots of sounds, reverb spaces, but I'll only go over some of my favorite ones in three levels. This level, which is a building here, another level, which is a forest, and the boss arena. So I'll start off with the main system, which is an insanity system, which is inspired by the game Amnesia. So basically what it is there is both a post process and a blend container in Wise that is triggered, that is affected by this player health value here. So when the game starts, I'm setting the RTPC value as well as this post-process blend, and they'll both increase in intensity as the player loses health. So the way the player loses health is basically as if they are in the dark or if they're not in the dark. If they're in the dark, this function timer will start, where basically every 0.5 seconds, this function will be called. And when the player is not in the dark, another function will be called, which is regenerating their health every 1 second, which will basically stop this timer from continuing to fire. So I'll show you really quick the blueprint here. So basically, at random intervals, I am affecting adding the post-process volume, which intensifies it, and I am decreasing the health, which affects the RTPC of this synthesizer blend container, which I'll show you more in Wise later. And basically, the in-light regen is just an inverse of that same system. So I'm checking if the player's in the light with things such as this light, like this floodlight, and there's also some ceiling lamps and things like that. So if the player is within this trigger, the box trigger, within the light, the player not in dark function, the event will be called, and then that function will be called. And then also for the player in the dark, once they leave that trigger. So basically, it's really similar to imagine if like a player was in fire or not and they lose health. So it's really similar with this light system. And I'll really quickly show you. Right, so that's that. Oh, and then this isn't really sound related, so I won't go over it too much, but this is the system for the gun. So there's a sound that goes off if the clip is empty, and there's also a reload system here with an ammo count, and I have a pickup to get ammo. So that's a decently complex system, but it's not it's basic. It's a pretty basic system when it comes to audio, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But I did want to show you that I basically have a shotgun here. That's not just the stock shotgun of the game. Cool. I'll go in Wise real quick and show you the health values and how that affects the blend container. So here, as you see, we'll go to the blend track. As the player loses health, so here's the float value, these various layers will come in. So I'll just play it for you over here real quick. If I can find, there's the transport. All right. So if there is no health, the player won't hear anything, but slowly over time, it intensifies. Cool. So that's basically how it works. And I have a lot of things affected by the player's health. There are some other drones and some low pitch. The systems are very similar. There's basically RTPCs that affect its volume. or various effects. So I can also show you that on the master bus. So I have these effects here, which are all affected by the player's health. So I have a delay, and it's wet to dry ratio, as you see here. It's RTPC is affected also by the player's health. And that goes for all of these effects as well. So I really wanted to make a full soundscape as well as a post-process volume to really show the insanity of the player over time. You can see it in its full effect in my other video where I just go through the gameplay, but I already showed you the audio system, so I think we're good. We're all good there. Cool. So I'll show you another system here which deals with music and using post-event callbacks to trigger sound effects as well as particle effects. So I have this dining room music here where basically there's going to be a fire and light show with music affected by it. I'll show you in game real quick and I'll describe how it works. So let's go up here. Cool. So what I'm doing there is I'm using some callbacks. So I'll go into the code here. So when the player goes through a trigger, the post event for the music will play. And then I'm using this callback mask of the music sync user queue to post these events in this multi-gate. So each of these execution nodes will go off in this order, triggering both a sound effect within a sequence container for the candles as well as an emitter. So I'll show you in Wwise here. Let's go down to the music. So each of these little flags here, which are basically chord progression changes, we'll just play it. So each of those will trigger a new fire and emitter. So I thought it was pretty cool. So I've always liked when music kind of affects the gameplay. So yeah, that's that. Also, along with this, there's another set of music with this TV, this downstairs, as well as the dining room music. Basically, I'm also tracking via an RTPC the player's speed, so if they're walking or not. And that will also affect the playback of the music as well as the wet to dry ratio. So I'll show you that here in Wwise. So I have this effect here where the wet to dry ratio is affected by this RTPC and the character's speed. So I thought it was I kind of wanted to go for this disorienting feeling for when the player was moving. So, and then also here, as I said, the playback speed. The playback speed increases very slightly whenever the player moves. So I kind of wanted to say like, oh, did that music really just change when I moved? I thought it was kind of cool. So I'll show you really quick the other music and how that works. So I want to make it decently subtle. At first I had it really extreme where it would go to like chopped and screwed kind of stuff. I thought it was a little too crazy. But yeah, basically that's the system I have going there. Cool. So that's me going through my notes, by the way, if you were wondering what the paper sound was. Let's go to the forest level. So the forest level is all about ambiances. There's ambiances in the first section too. Let's save it, yeah. So I have a lot of things going on here. So I have everything from just more 2D sounds, just the general forest, to the leaves rustling on these trees, to animal triggers as well, and just all sorts of randomized stuff going on there. So first thing I'll go over though, is this river. So full disclosure on the river, I did get the original blueprint from this really awesome sound designer named Trollez Nygaard, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm not pronouncing it right, but he basically made this spine-based volumetric audio volume so that you can hear the river, or just basically any audio volume, along any point. So if it's basically tracking how the player's closest point to this spline here, and then playing the sound from there. So if you didn't have this spline here, you would have to basically put a bunch of different emitters all along this river. And that would never sound natural, because there'd be some spaces where the sound was louder than others, and that's just not how a river sounds. So this spline really helps that. And then when you're inside the spline, you basically hear it from all directions. It's a really awesome tool. It's similar to a tool in the Wwise 301 tutorial with a river, but this is in Unreal as compared to Unity. So I'm showing you this though. Obviously I won't take credit for the original code, but I did add some things onto this system. So I added these river rock sounds, which basically are playing on the rocks in the river. I'm setting multiple positions for this sound, and I'm spawning an AK component at these river rocks, and it's basically the sound of rapids. So I wanted to give the illusion, not an illusion, I wanted to make the river a little bit more dynamic and changing over time, and just, you know, not making it just the same sound across the whole river. So I wanted to put these multiple positions there. And additionally, I have some animals there, but I'll go to my trees, which is the majority of where my animal sounds are coming from. So I have here this is really simple, but I have these leaves triggers here, which basically there's a looping sound of leaves wind and leaves when you're under the tree, just to make it so the forest is dynamically changing. And then I have these animals being triggered. So this system here is very similar in logic to the other system I had with the Insanity system, where I have timers being set off at random intervals. So that's what this random float in a range is. But instead of affecting a float variable, I'm instead triggering these events through this multi-gate, which is also randomized. So each of these events are being randomized at locations, and these locations are in the trees here. So do you see the little transform there? Yeah. So at the base of the tree, and then within the tree itself. So I'm randomizing those, and then there are also these random containers inside that are being placed at each of these locations. And guess what? Those random triggers are triggering random containers, which have randomized volume and low pass filters. So I'm really going for randomness here and having just a forest ambience that's never the same, and just playing from all sorts of locations. It'd be really awesome if I was able to one day, and I would love to I plan on doing this in Dolby Atmos, and I could really have the height of these sound emitters as well. So that's the way the forest animals are being played, and that's on each of these type of plants. So there's different animals on each of these, including this giant bush, and then each of these trees. They all have different animals that are triggered within them at different places. So next thing I'll go over these little square things here. So those are simulating an animal running away from you. So basically, this little cube, when you enter the trigger, I'm spawning an AK component at that cube's location. And then the cube at first was mostly just a visual cue, but I kept so I could just see something moving. But basically what I'm doing is I'm spawning the AK component at that location, and then I'm moving the AK location horizontally away from the player. So it's traveling 500 units on the x-axis over 2 seconds. And this basically gives the illusion of an animal running away from you, like a rabbit or something kind of like that. Cool. So there's a lot of things going on here. There's also these are like some animals eating, but those are just basic AK ambient sounds that are on auto post. So those are being triggered as soon as the game starts. But the last thing I have in this little area is there's the sound of wolves and various other things that are triggered as you come closer to this big brassiere thing, which is going to trigger you going into the boss battle. So I have a lot of sounds that are being triggered as you go closer to that, but I'll give you I'll give you a little taste of this by just walking through the area. Here we go. I'll have a little fly that is also triggered randomly. And foliage sounds. There's the sound building as we approach this. Now I'll teleport. Cool, and that's the boss. So that's a good segue into the final thing, the boss battle. So let's open up the little play pace. Kind of like McDonald's. Cool. Okay. So here, first I'll go over these little environment interactions, then I'll finish off this tech demo with talking about this boss guy here. So let's look at this guy. So this little Indiana Jones rock rolling thing. So here it is. Basically, I have a sound that will play when you break this thing that's holding it back. I'll have a sound on the rock itself, which is basically the rolling sound, as well as a sound that'll play when this trigger is hit. So I am going to post this sound here, which is when you break the component, holding it back. And then I'll spawn this AK component on the rolling rock. So this basically will make it so that it's not playing from a location, but it's attached to the sphere itself. And then I will destroy that component when the sphere is destroyed, which happens after 5 seconds, because I don't want the rock to be rolling forever. So that's basically how that works. And then I also have these rocks here. Those are pretty similar. The sounds will trigger when I hit each of these. And this little capsule here, if it hits the ground, which also has a blueprint, basically saying that a rock impact sound of hitting this will go off when it hits the ground. And then the sound of the boss getting hit by these hazards is being triggered on the boss itself. So I will go into the boss. So it's this little brassiere thing. It was an asset on the Unreal store that I wanted to use. And I kind of want to go for this like abstract, slow-moving, foreboding boss. So it's very much inspired by Mr. X, as you can see, Mr. Triple X here, by the game Resident Evil 2, Mr. X in that game. I kind of want to similarly go by that. I have a lot of things in the plans for this still, including an actual level space, like more hallway kind of base stuff. Some shape shifting for this guy, him getting bigger and smaller as the battle goes on, potentially affected by the music and some callback stuff, and some more accompanying sounds for him. But I'll show you what I got so far. So here are all the damageables. So basically each of those crushable things, so the rocks, when they hit it, Mr. X, they will both destroy those actors. So that could be the projectile from the player's gun or the rocks. And they'll also trigger these functions here. So these functions, as long as they have enough health, that's what this branch is here, they will post an event and reset and subtract from the boss's health. And they'll also toggle the visibility of a particle system to show that it's gotten hit. So the same thing here, that's the projectile, and then same basic logic with the two other ones, just with different amounts of health that they'll lose and different sounds, obviously. But then I also have, if the player's health is depleted, a death sound will go off, which is kind of this like epic explosion kind of thing. And that will cue the sound as well as basically this giant fire on the boss. So that's the basic function of the boss. And then also, and then here's the AI here. Basically, it's a pawn sensing system where as long as the boss can see the player, and they can apply damage here, then they will move towards the player. That's what this AI move to node is doing here. And that's just a respawn. I won't go too much into that. So also with Mr. XXX, I have an audio system. So there's 2 float variables, including the boss's health and the distance to the boss, that will affect these 2 sounds. So these 2 variables affect things in Wwise, so I'll show you that. Such as the wet to dry ratio again on this effect, like this distortion here. That's affected by the player's distance, so as Mr. X gets closer, that effect will go more into play, as well as a pitch shift. So one of the sounds will go up in pitch as the player approaches them. So I'll give you a simulation of that here. Let's get out of that view. Pretty weird. But yeah, so that's what's happening. I also have this kind of low droney thing, so as the player gets closer to the boss, that sound will get louder as well. Cool. And then lastly, there's also the trigger rate of these high drones will go off as the boss's health gets lower. So it's basically kind of like this abstract cry sound. And then those will affect the trigger rate duration. So it'll get smaller and smaller as the boss loses health. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of all the stuff in the game. In the description, I'll also link just a full gameplay playthrough if you just want to see the sounds and just not the techie side, but just kind of the gameplay through. But thanks for checking this video out, and yeah, I'll continue to put updates on this game later on my website. Thank you.